radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. How you doing? Fade to Black. Yeah. Whoo, man. Today's Tuesday, December 9th, 2025. Let's do this, man. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This week on Fade to Black, another great week. It's always great around here. Last night, John Olson was with us in his book series, Stranger Bridgerland. Tonight, Dr. Heather Lynn is back with us. It's an Anunnaki evening. Tomorrow night, Gary Hazeltine joins us from the UK. We're going to talk about Rendlesham. Thursday night, filmmaker Jason Kenzie joins us. You've watched his stuff, Searching for Sasquatch. He's amazing, and so it's all Bigfoot all night long on Thursday. Wow, what an amazing week. And I've got Dr. Heather Lynn in here tonight. Want to remind everybody my next event coming up is this February, the Conscious Life Expo, February 20th through the 23rd, 2026, right here in Los Angeles at the LAX Hilton. The links for that are below. All right. I had something fun I was going to mention, and it was kind of tied into Heather and I's little talk before the show. I'm gonna hold that one back. Yeah. Boop. I'm gonna hold that one back. But yeah. If you guys only knew. Dr. Heather Lynn is here tonight. Her new book, The Anunnaki Revelation, is available now for pre-order. It is out on February 2nd. We have the links for that below. All of her books are available, including The Anunnaki Connection, which I have. It is an amazing book. She has been a frequent guest here on Fade to Black. And I haven't seen Heather in a while, though, but she is back with us tonight. And we are going to discuss her new book, The Anunnaki Revelation. And it's a different take on the Anunnaki. And we are going to do the deep dive tonight. I am very excited about this discussion. We all know she's a internationally published author. She's a symbologist. She deals with ancient myths and hidden knowledge. And she has spent decades working on this. And I remember the first time I had her on the show, and which I'll have to ask her about this, but it was probably 10, maybe 11, 12 years ago. And the first time she was on the show, and the way that we were able to share ideas and communicate in that conversation just set the tone for a friendship that has lasted for a very long time. I have a very deep respect for her and how she approaches all of this. And we're going to get into it tonight with the Anunnaki. Her links for everything are below on our website and throughout social media. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only Dr. Heather Lynn, and she's right there. Heather, what's going on?
Nothing much. What's going on with you?
Nothing much.
Couple books.
Yeah. But it's been a minute. How have you been?
Yeah, been busy, hanging in there. I had a really interesting year. You can read about it on my Substack. It was a wild year of what I called blood, flood, and just fire. It was pretty wild. So that's a whole other story in and of itself. But there's been a lot of talk in the media these days about spiritual attacks, and I have a lot of people who have claimed that that's what I was going through, given my strange set of circumstances. So, hey, I'm here for it. So, but things are good. Been real busy. So I'm alive.
Yeah. Okay. So you opened the door to this. So let's start right there. When when people have these experiences, and if they're brave enough to talk about them, there are those out there that go, man, no, I'm not buying into it. Then there's others that understand, maybe show some empathy towards it too as well. But these things can be pretty crazy, can't they? And it's a very real thing that you have to deal with. And then it's your family, it's the trauma, and it's the other emotional stuff that goes along with it. Where is this ever going to end? Right? That pretty much sums it up, doesn't it?
It does actually. And if you're somebody who, I don't necessarily call myself skeptical because that just paints a whole other debunker sort of mythos that I don't subscribe to, but I am someone that needs a lot more evidence. And so I wouldn't have thought necessarily I was going through any sort of spiritual attack, but sometimes you just see things, you experience things, and it seemed to work. It fits. So, and it was right off the tails of, writing the Baphomet book and going on tour for that, encountering some interesting folks and maybe making some people angry along the way, and experiencing some things that, when I say I had flood, fire, I literally had a tornado at the house, and we had a flood in the basement. There was fire in the basement. It was all in the basement, which is like spooky, of course, the basement. But my house is like 160 some years old, so it's an old Victorian home, but it's all updated. But it was so. And then I had like a strange like medical problem where I had just a nosebleed that sent me to the random nosebleed that sent me to the hospital. And I thought, how strange is that? And I kept saying to the emergency room physician, this is not a big deal, right? I mean, you can stop the bleeding. I'm sure you can stick one of those like football player tampons up my nose or something.
Right.
And they couldn't. They had to call critical care. I was about bleeding out. They couldn't find the source of the blood. They had to put this thing called, this is like really great talking about the Anunnaki, but I have to say this story because it's totally wild. Like, boop. But so no, seriously, it was so bad. They put this thing in my nose called a rhino rocket. And oh God. Yeah, it was so bad. So it's like one of those like nose tampons, but it's a balloon. So they shoved it in my face and then they and pumped it up. And I had to leave that in my nose for days. So it was like so serious. And I'm like, why did that even happen? But there was a host of things. There was death in the family that was like really actually pretty tragic that I won't go into, but it was a wild ride. And I was actually contacted by somebody who saw me on a different podcast. And she was like, can we meet? And I'm like, yeah, why not? Just meet random people from podcasts. So I went to have coffee.
Yeah, that sounds safe.
I'm super smart that way, right? So I asked for it.
Yeah.
So she seemed cool. And so I met her for coffee, but she said she had something to give me. And so she gives me these occult books, and she said that the universe told her that I needed these books. But then she also said that somehow she knew the plants told her that I was having night terrors, which was true. I like literal night terrors, and that I was under some sort of spiritual attack. And I was like, oh, okay. So she gave me a tincture, and she was like, well, take this. And I'm like, she was about to leave to go to a different state too. So this was her little time in the Cleveland area, and then she's going to hightail to Maine. And so she's leaving me with this, and I'm thinking, should I just take this, like, who knows what, from a stranger I met from the podcast who now is going to like flee the state? Sure, why not? So I go ahead and I take this tincture, and sure enough, though, everything she said that would happen. Now, of course, it could be power suggestion, placebo.
Sure.
I'm open to that, but everything she said that would happen really did happen. It was wild. So she said that what she had put into this tincture, now she had a background in herbalism, and she was working for a pharmaceutical company. And so she had an actual like academic background in it, but she was also Algonquin. So she had a lot of this internal knowledge and cultural, education as well. And so she was a very well-rounded person. And she gave me this tincture, told me that all of these different plants and essences that were in it had these different functions. One of them would make it so that in the dream, I would be sort of lucid, but I wouldn't necessarily experience things. It would just be like an observer effect. I was like, okay. So sure enough, it happened. And I had this wild dream that was super deep and archetypal and really heavy. And afterwards, I was just like, whoa. And then after I had meditation that was just really productive, and I was like, I'm losing my mind here, but whatever. After all of that happened, it was really like things lifted. And so, and then of course, just to make sure, I had my friend Bill Bean do a deliverance. I'm like, okay, what other religion can we get? Do we have like anything sage? Well, I'll take frankincense, whatever you got. So I got every
Right.
every angle you could imagine, just blessing and blessing and blessing. And so, but yeah, weird and wild ride.
Well, was this when you canceled the show?
Yeah, no, well, it
I
was
mean, we
coming
had
off of
you.
that. Mhm.
Yeah, we had you. But okay. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
no
No, no,
reason
no.
to get sideways
No, no,
into
no,
that.
it's okay. It's okay. I was going through a pretty serious health issue. So going
Well,
for
I was
treatment with
so
that.
excited, for a week, going, man, Heather's going to be here, Heather's going to be here, and
I
then day
know.
of. Anyway,
It was
here's
rough.
yeah,
It's been rough.
here's the thing with all of that. With your research into not only the esoteric and the hidden and going into ancient history and following that stuff and getting into the research, and then you go through these experiences yourself, is that where you just back up and go, well, there's something else to this world that we're not being taught, and I'm experiencing it myself. Do you go through that thought process?
Yes, yes, as especially this past year. It's been something that I really had to take a look in the mirror and figure out where I was standing on issues.
Mhm.
I was told a story. It's like just a little anecdote about the devil in the fence post. Somebody who is on the fence post, and they're watching this spiritual war go down on the battlefield, and at the end of it, God takes his people and they go away, and then the devil rounds up his people and then they go away, and he comes back to the person on the fence post and says, come on. And the person on the fence post is like, yeah, no, I'm fine here. And the devil says, I own the fence. so that was something that hit me a little hard, because I never considered myself on any fence post per se, not in the sense that I couldn't decide, but just insofar as and this sounds bad, but I thought I was a little above it. Not in a way that I was better than, but I was trying to take the perspective of an observer, where I could just not get in the battlefield, but maybe sit on that fence post and just observe and try to figure out what was going on. And over time, I think I realized that there was really something going on that was a lot deeper and darker than I ever wanted to admit or imagine. And I've had to really just really reassess a few things here and there. So yeah, we'll leave it at
Do you remember the movie Crossroads?
no.
Movie Crossroads had the Karate Kid, whatever his name is, Ralph.
Macchio.
Yeah. So it's him, and he's a young guitar player, right? And it's like Faust. It's a takeoff of Faust.
Mm.
And so he gets an offer from the devil to be a better guitar player, like the best guitar player ever. And that's what the movie's. It's like Faust. It's a Faust story. Anyway, it's about crossroads. Are these two roads in Mississippi where the devil hangs out? And if you want to make a deal, you go to the crossroads, and the devil will show up in whatever incarnation, right? And you make a deal, right? Sign your name, right? Sign a contract. And I always, it was a fun movie. Faust is a great story, and there's different things with folklore in the guitar world about this. But anyway, I go to the crossroads. I go to Mississippi, and a friend of mine took me to a juke joint at a house. And we didn't get there until 2 a.m. This is in the middle of a red mud field, this white farmhouse, right out of the movies, man, with like 200 cars parked in all black people, right? Yeah, I'm going in there with my long hair. And what I experienced that night, so I not going to get into details. We leave. Sun is coming up. We leave at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning. And we're driving out of there. I went, so Crossroads was real. It was real. You go and you visit that and you experience and you understand where the mythology comes from and you experience it firsthand. And I'm serious, man. I felt like I was lucky to get out of town.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fun. It was mysterious. It was spooky. It was voodoo.
Oh.
It was all of that, man. I remember watching them dance. It's hard to explain. It's really hard to explain, but to experience the style of music that they're playing, this, authentic blues, Delta blues, that's going on with this crazy dancing for hours. And I'm watching that and it was hypnotic. It was, yeah, it was a trip. It was a real trip. And then I went back and watched Crossroads again. I was like, yeah, it's real. It's real.
Yeah.
And then when we get into something like the Anunnaki, the same subject, believe it or not, where you go and you start reading about the Anunnaki, there's so many different stories and different ways to approach this, but all of it pretty out there and fun, right? And you do your thing in life and you experience life, and then you research something like the Anunnaki. It's not that far removed, is it? It's like anything is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been asked this multiple times because sometimes my books will go from the Anunnaki to the one like about Baphomet and then another Anunnaki and all this. And people will say, why are you writing about the occult and not just the Anunnaki or ancient history or these gods? And what is the connection? Sometimes people don't see the connection, and I wouldn't have seen the connection at all either when I first started out. I think you mentioned we spoke for the first time 13, I think it was 13 years ago maybe. And it was a very different place in my research because I was looking into things like just with a sense of curiosity and no preconceived notions. And
you had more of an academic approach.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I was coming from that background, and I wanted to bring that to the sort of alternative world, as we used to call it. I think it's not so alternative anymore. I think it is becoming the mainstream. So there's more of us out here looking at these alternative ideas. And over time, though, I didn't want to become part of that where it was just I'm believing things. I wasn't that person with the poster, although I do have the poster that says I want to believe, because I don't. Nietzsche had a saying where there are two different types of people in the world, those who want to know and those who want to believe. I want to know. So I've tried to approach things with as unbiased a view as I can, but over a decade of researching all of this and going down these rabbit holes and finding these strange connections, you just can't help but to see things through a whole different light. It really does change you over time. And so I would almost wish that I hadn't seen behind the curtain. But what's done is done. And now I just move forward and try to still know as opposed to believe, but it's gotten a whole lot crazier.
Yeah. Because the word belief, at least to me, it insinuates religion or something that you know is not real, but you want to believe that it is. That's belief to me. To know is dealing with facts and to have something revealed so you understand. And that's two different things. And I'm chasing the no. I'm not chasing belief. I'm chasing, trying to get to the truth. I'm chasing that. And so it's always out there, right? It's always one step further. It's always one step further. Belief you can have like that. That's an instantaneous thing. And so even though I do have the I want to believe poster right there. Right? There it is.
It's classic.
Yeah, hanging on the wall.
Well, the truth is out there, so.
Now, how is your approach with the new book? By the way, everybody, it's available for pre-order right now. It's out February 2nd, in about a month and a half. How is your approach different from your first book on the Anunnaki Connection?
So the first book, I was literally making connections. I was taking everybody along in real time. I sort of do that anyway. I don't ever claim, this may be something that annoys people, but I don't ever claim to have the answers, the only answers, only because these are very difficult subjects. And there are a lot of different people who've had great things to say. And this is an active field of research and inquiry. So I just put it out as I see it and I develop as we go. And so for the first book, it ended up being more of an overview of the Anunnaki subject and my journey into exploring what it all means. And so I went over a lot of different fundamental theories about the Anunnaki, obviously about Sitchin and others. And I started to take firsthand accounts from people. I started to just kind of put a whole lot in there about trying to get a good handle on the Anunnaki, aside from just the Sitchin viewpoint or the Michael Heiser viewpoint or this duality that we had found ourselves in for a long time. I still think we're in it to a large extent, unfortunately, but I'm hoping to break out of that with this sort of writing. So the first book was a introductory text, we'll say. And at the very end, and this is so cliche, but it's true, I ended up with more questions than answers at the end. In the end, it was just like, wait a minute, I was just coming to this, maybe a breaking point where something was putting it all together for me, but I only had so much manuscript left. So I had to keep going. And so for the past 5 years, I would say, I kept on researching from that book. And so the next book is the Anunnaki Revelation, where I'm revealing what it was that I sort of, I guess, had revealed to me. Not in so much of a religious viewpoint, like it was revealed to me through a prophet, but just as the information emerged through the research. And so this particular one, this one gets a little crazy because it's a crazy topic. And this is a really wild out there thing to discuss. So I take a different viewpoint than Sitchin and a different viewpoint than, say, Michael Heiser. I don't really take a huge viewpoint at all. I'm trying to show the evidence, show some questions that people haven't been necessarily asking. And that's what led me to this, I guess, revelation, which was more so about the nature of the Anunnaki themselves. And I visit that through the lens of looking at their rituals and some of the artifacts that have been lost before the looting even. And so some very controversial finds and some very, my favorite one out of the book, I think, is the wristwatches of the gods. That's one that everybody is like very interested in. And I was happy to have actually found the wristwatches. And so I'm here to report that they're not watches.
What? Wait, whoa. Pump the brakes.
I have pictures.
What do you mean you found the watches?
The watches, they exist. They're actually gold cuffs. And they were excavated out of Iraq in 1989. And there's about one picture left that is the official photograph that came from a very little known Iraqi archaeologist named Muzahim Hussein, who has disappeared, last seen in Mosul in 2015. There's a whole thing I write about in the book about what happened to this trove of artifacts that was found in Iraq by the Iraqi people, which was a problem at the time because it didn't have sort of this Western sanction. So the archaeologists went in after the Westerners left, started doing their own research. This was right on the cusp of the war. And they found this particular archaeologist, Professor Hussein. He was a academic and very renowned. He stumbled upon the largest find of gold, the biggest of gold other than King Tut. Now, this particular discovery should have made massive news. It should have been covered everywhere, and yet it wasn't. It wasn't, and it was destroyed. It was stolen. There's a whole paper trail that went along with it, and it's actually a quite tragic story. But in that particular hoard were the cuffs and many other things too.
Okay, so was there a function for let's everybody knows what the watches are, from
This
the
may
sculpture.
disappoint. This may disappoint because
Well,
I've heard
no,
everyone say,
not at,
"Oh no, it's like
not at all.
eye
Not
watches," but
no. So what was there a function to them? Was there a
yeah,
purpose for them, or was it just adornment and jewelry?
adornment and jewelry, but there was a ritual purpose. So it was
There you
very,
go. Okay.
and that kind of points into then what I started to find in the research about the nature of the Anunnaki, the nature of their relationship with the kings, and the nature with, more importantly, maybe for this book, the Apkallu, which are a lot different than the Anunnaki and a little lesser known, but very mysterious, very important, and very important to the anointing of the kings. So these are the things that are actually depicted on the cuffs. I think I have it somewhere on my Substack somewhere. I can send you a picture. But yeah, I have the picture, nice big, it's beautifully detailed. It is absolutely gorgeous. The gold that they found, the jewelry was just stunning. It showed that they had the most amazing craftsmanship, that it wasn't at all archaic or primitive. It was very intricate and very detailed, and there was a lot of it. And so these were the tombs of many different queens from Nimrod, and they had, I mean, everything you could imagine. A huge book was published about it by this particular archaeologist. So he knew that this was an important find and he wanted to protect it. And so he went to work with his team, photographing, cataloging, describing, analyzing, both in English and Arabic, all of these artifacts. Some of them ended up in bank vaults that were then bombed.
For sure. But that
Yeah.
is one of the most tragic events in human history, was the looting of every museum and library in Iraq during the Iraqi wars. I'm going to say that plural. So every city, every city in Iraq that had a museum or a library was raided and ransacked. And the stuff that and it's all gone. They took everything. And not only the stuff on display upstairs, but everything that was in hidden rooms or in the basement, all of that stuff is gone. And
Yeah.
I'm not putting a blame on anybody for this, but I'll say, if you have a family that you need to feed and you make absolutely zero money, right? $0, and that happens, and then you have an opportunity to go and raid like everybody else is doing. You're not the only one. And then sell it on the black market and make more money than you have in your life. You're probably going to do it. It's family first. And I understand that part of it. But the tragedy is we're talking about one of the first civilizations, and all of that history that it belongs to the record of history for the country and geographically. It's very important that it stays there because it tells a story. Well, that stuff is gone. It's all gone. That the whole country was raided and depleted.
Yeah.
It's really sad. It's a tragic. When I say in human history, Iraq and ancient Egypt, ancient Sumer, Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, that was first. And then there's the before history part of it too as well. All of that is gone.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is crazy. And so, and it's unfortunate that the archaeologist himself is gone. I tried to look for him. There's no evidence that he made it out of Mosul. There was rumors that perhaps he passed. The best case scenario is that he was able to move out, but the last correspondence, he said that he was stuck in Mosul and wasn't able to get out, and things were looking really dire. And that was the last correspondence. And so, yeah, so the only thing left is his, work, and it was published and put together by the University of Chicago, but they don't make it easily accessible, of course, and nobody's bothering to really do much with it. It's just a whole mess, an academic mess that you'd expect to have happen. But what's unfortunate is the loss of all of that culture. But I looked through and tried to piece together what this particular professor had to say on the artwork, on the meanings of the different things he found, because he had more context and more understanding. And that's when things got a little interesting, maybe a lot interesting too. That's when I came about this connection between the poppy and the Anunnaki. And that was a whole strange road that I wasn't expecting. So in a lot of the artwork, you'll see, this is very iconic. You'll see that these Anunnaki beings are holding little bushels of flowers. They look like maybe vines. Sometimes they are depicted as dates or something like that, but there's never really a consensus on what those are. Sometimes they'll say they're stylized trees of life. That's fine. But when you look at the little rosettes and you look at some of the very intricate patterns, they start to resemble flowers, but they start to represent more specifically the pods of the poppy plant right as it is about to let the latex out that gets harvested for opium.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a particular stage in its life cycle. And so it's interesting. I'm looking into this, speculative, but I had reason. I had a few tips to suspect that. And then there was older research where people were saying, yeah, okay, there were poppies, blah, blah, blah. But then over time, it went into probably about the 1960s that fell out of favor. And people just started saying, well, these are just like flowers. They're just flowers, or they're just little style icons or rosettes. And it just got very generic, or date palms or what have you. Or sometimes pomegranates.
Okay. Are you suggesting, I want your answer, but
Mhm.
my take when I hear that is then there is an opium connection. Do you think that they were utilizing those plants for those, I don't want to say medicinal because it could have been
Well,
anything. You know what I mean? Is that what you're suggesting here, that they were aware of what the poppy could be?
I'm certain that they were, because they said it. So in
Mm.
addition to the research coming from the local professors in Iraq who knew all along that these represented the poppy, it was important to their culture. And when you looked at the discovery from the tomb, there were these little beautiful, by the way, little poppy, just gold. They weren't really wearables. They were just little poppies that were made from gold, just scattered like table scatter at a wedding or something like that, or confetti. These were also all over their headdresses and this sort of thing. And the researchers, just when they logged it, they said poppy. These were poppies. It was just a no-brainer to them. Everything was labeled a poppy. So that was interesting, and I would be more inclined to take their word for it. And especially since there was a track record of that when we had closer correspondences before things started getting war torn. So we did also agree that they were poppies, and then we started to deviate, and we in the West, that is, started to deviate on that. But then you go and you look at the texts themselves, the medical text, the cuneiform tablets, and they actually reference the poppy. They call it the joy plant. It's the whole gill.
Man, I always like the Anunnaki. They just went up a whole nother level. And right. And in our conversation off air earlier, this is bizarre. The universe knows, doesn't it?
It does.
The universe truly knows. But okay, so let's pin that to the wall, because we're going to come back to that. Here is what is really interesting. You mentioned Michael Heiser. Michael Heiser, going to move on. He's no longer with us. Hey, Michael, what's up? But Michael was, I'm right and you're wrong on so many different stands. He did not have an open mind. Sitchin did. Sitchin had an open mind. He was just throwing it out there, but but Michael had a very closed view of everything, that he was the scholar and he was here to tell you right from wrong. And that's a different approach. But for me, now here's the third take. As I'm looking at the Anunnaki, and I'm looking at science, and I'm looking at anthropology and archaeology, and certainly chemistry and our history, where these statements, which are still, part of academia, that Homo sapien sapien, us, the version of us right now is 200,000 years old, 250,000 at the farthest out. We've got no fossil record of us. We just appeared. Then we have, okay, so that's the science side. And then Sitchin says we were created, that things happened. And that you look at the timeline, and Sitchin's ideas line up with modern anthropology and archaeology. And that's the part where I go, okay, now there is something to this story, because we have two different camps that are way far apart, right, on theories and ideas, but are starting to merge on a very crucial timeline of us. And that's what I find interesting. And Heiser poo-pooed all of that. He didn't want to have anything to do with that. But if you look at those two, they merge. And that's when I stepped back and said, okay, there is something to this story. I don't know what the answers are, but one is supporting the other, isn't it?
It seems to be, and clearly Michael's not here to defend himself, but what I will say is that he, like many scholars, bring their bias, and he liked to appear as though he wasn't biased, but his background was that he was a very devout evangelical Christian, and so he often was subtly trying to push a particular biblical narrative that had its own specified timeline, and that's not to suggest that he didn't have great research. He was definitely renowned. But again, every scholar brings their own bias in, and it's your job as another researcher to look at that bias, just take it into consideration, weigh it against the other, and then put that out. And then also cite your own bias. That's part of the research
that's what
process.
A good researcher does. That's what a good researcher. A famous man once said, right? Very smart man once said, when you are wrong, you learn something. It's such a basic thing, right? If you're wrong and you just learned why you were wrong, you have learned something. And that's what a great researcher does, is you have an open mind where you go, okay, I can consider, okay, all right, it doesn't line up, but okay, all right. But that's what you want. You want to have that kind of conversation. And that's one of the things that I think is missing in academia today. But
one of the many things.
yeah. That's for another show.
That's a whole nother show.
But my views of the Anunnaki have evolved. They really have. When you go back, okay, so were you once, as I was, a nuts and bolts Nibiru, gold mining, shielding planet, the Anunnaki, that were you a dyed in the wool Anunnaki researcher at one point that only had that kind of worldview about them and then evolved from there?
No, not at all. In fact, I hadn't even considered that particular part of their ancient astronaut connection. That was something that my interest in ancient astronaut theory went to the Von Daniken, Chariots of the Gods, the OG sort of thing. And they didn't really touch on the Sitchin aspect too much. So I was coming into it just without any presuppositions. But I was intrigued because I thought, well, it's a fair reading. It's a fair interpretation. I don't know that the nuts and bolts part I can buy. I could see through that particular bias because of the time that it was written. It's like, well, I doubt that if something's so advanced, it's going to have like 1960s Flash Gordon style apparatus to get here. So that always stuck out to me. But that didn't mean that the whole idea of it being extraterrestrial or somehow coming to us was completely out of the window. But I just didn't have a strong opinion. That's probably why I was so intrigued. I wanted to know, like, what is this? What is this, quote, Sumerian problem? Because the academic point of view was that there was, in fact, a problem, that there was no explanation for how this civilization could just pop up in like the course of 200 years out of a semi-settled hunter-gatherer group. That there was complete mystery how you could go from just going along like the Paleolithic lifestyle to boom, civilization. And it was something that intrigued me, so I wanted to know, but I didn't come into it with the nuts and bolts mindset. I was definitely not on any side or the other. I was just very curious, and I was open to most things, because it's fun. It's fun to look into ideas. You don't always have to go and try to argue that one is right or the other. It's like, oh, look at this cool idea. Let's explore it. And then after you explore it, you start to think, maybe this isn't. But what does this person have to say? So it was just more of a process to me. But over time, you can't help but start to say, wait a minute, I think I'm making connections. I think that I'm seeing something here. And then I started to develop my own, I guess, perspective on what I feel the Anunnaki are, at least thus far. And this could change completely because I'm in a constant state of trying to find these answers. It's part of my mission, I guess, if you will. But as of now, I feel that it's important to get a little bit away from the Sitchin narrative, only because I feel that it is stagnating the field completely. I think that it's important for people who are coming into it to maybe look at that. I mean, I teach like an Anunnaki 101 course online, and I definitely introduce everybody to those. It's like a fundamental thing to say, who are the thinkers? What are the ideas? But we still then have to kind of move from that so that we can see what else is going on, because there's been tablets that have been translated since then. There's been a lot of different things to, consider that we only know a fraction of what these tablets have to say. There's like 500,000 tablets right now housed in museums and in private collections, and only 250,000 of those have been translated at all. So that's not saying any of the probably millions that are out there that haven't been discovered. And so it's just like we're on to something now with AI as well that's going to be able to translate this for better or worse. But the projects are ongoing, and they were just able to crack the code, I guess, find another Gilgamesh line using artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I
Again,
heard about that. I heard
yeah,
about
yeah.
that. When the University of Chicago did this is in the 90s. Back then, the internet was so basic and stuff, but the University of Chicago had one of the coolest things, period, on the internet. They had a Sumerian text translator. So you could go in, think about this, 1998, where they have all of an indexed version of all of the Sumerian tablets up to that point in a database. And so you could type in a phrase or a word and it would search the tablets for it, and you can expand onto that. I did that for months.
Yeah.
Months. I was doing
Same.
everything. And some of it, not all of Sitchin's stuff. In fact, a big chunk of what Sitchin said was in the tablets I couldn't find. But I really thank the university. But some of it was there.
Mhm.
And that was the
Yeah.
other crazy thing, where it's like you don't want a conspiracy to turn out to be true, because then you just lose your mind. You're like, what? This shit is real. But
Yeah.
but that's what was happening to me with the University of Chicago. I spent a lot of time, because I love Sitchin. I never interviewed him. I never did. He was one that got away from me. But anyway, the things that were lining up for me with the Anunnaki, you have the folklore, you have the mythology, you have this, but you have the other cultures around the world that have a similar type of origin story and things that were lining
Mhm.
up. And I'm seeing baskets all around the world. I'm seeing these icons are popping up at different cultures too as well. And I was very confused. I saw the connection, but the point is, to all of this, if you go into it with an open mind, then you're able to see through it in 3D. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's most important. Now, okay, so with all of that being said, it sounds like I'm agreeing with you. What I'm saying is, University of Chicago is a magical place for me to go and do a bunch of the Sumerian research with the Anunnaki. Today, my take has evolved. I'm starting to change. So let's get to
Mhm.
some basic questions for you. Are you looking at the timeline of the Anunnaki lining up with 250,000 years ago, 400,000 years ago that was here prehistory?
Well, yes and no. So one of the first things, so you asked me about how I felt about Sitchin and what brought me in that way. I would say though, coming into any of this, the only, I think, mentor person that I really was drawn to was Michael Cremo. And he has this idea he's the best. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. Hey, Michael, thank you. So
It's two of us. Trust me. That's two of us.
he's the best. So his views of extreme human antiquity. Now that sounds really wild, and a lot of the claims are really wild. But as you see over the years, the number line just keeps getting pushed back and pushed back. So I was already open to a lot of different ideas about these timelines and when these things are sort of happening. So you also have some evidence for things like the big brain bang, where we just get to be like Homo sapiens sapien and we're really smart all of a sudden. And then there's the question of human migration patterns, and those numbers are always getting pushed back. And so there's a lot of stuff in flux. And what I found is that there are a lot of these like overlaps too coming about as to how long ago something was or whatever. Still, I don't have an answer as in like, yes, it happened on this day or this time. But I feel like there's something to say, put a pin in right there, where there's something in the extreme human antiquity department there, where it's a very long time ago, or at least longer than the mainstream consensus have it. But then the idea of something really, really existential happening about 12,500 years ago is something. I don't know how anyone can start to dispute this at this point. So you have these particular timelines to consider. And then you put that with all of the different flood myths that are all around the world and different cultures and oral traditions. And so even if you can't say radiocarbon date the time right to a specific era or what have you, it starts to paint a bit of a picture that, to me at least, says that something happened 12,500 years ago that coincided with civilization coming about. Now, this idea, though, of the Anunnaki in particular, this is where my research starts to take a stranger than average turn. So, just spoiler alert for the book, I guess the revelation is that it is my view thus far that the Anunnaki are not extraterrestrial, that they are what we would call ultra terrestrial.
Here we go. Okay. Yeah. That's
so they could have been here very long ago, but then also had an impact.
Let me jump in there. Humans, us, Homo sapiens sapiens, every day, our ability to understand grows. We understand more. One of the things that we are understanding and grasping is that word, interdimensional. That wasn't a word that was used 50 years ago. It was, I don't even think it was in the dictionary. And 100 years ago, 200. Now, ghosts, spirits, okay, but that's could they be the same? Is there a connect? Well, that's a bit, but the idea of extra dimensions, of parallel worlds, of the multiverse, and another reality beyond what we experience day to day here is something that we are understanding now. So to look at the Anunnaki in that way, we have the capacity to understand and consider what you are suggesting. And we didn't have that, 100 years ago. And I really appreciate that take. How did you arrive at that?
It was actually through my research into the Apkallu specifically, because if you were
who are the Apkallu? This is I'm learning.
So the Apkallu, if you were to Google Anunnaki, you're going to come up with a lot of different pictures, some Sumerian, some Assyrian, and some that are actually not Anunnaki, but Apkallu. They're the winged entities that have generally a bird face, but they're winged entities, sometimes called the genie and later the jinn. They evolved into that. But the Apkallu, very ancient, and they were described as being semi-biological, whereas the Anunnaki were not necessarily described as being not biological. It was kind of implied that they were biological somehow. So when you look at the stories more closely and you see this idea of the Anunnaki, first of all, we have a pantheon of these gods. There's like 12 plus, but there's actually many more. And the Anunnaki becomes this almost blanket term, like we would use the term Lord. So like the landlord, or Jesus is Lord, or there's this, we kind of just put that out there and just, we know what it means. It could be very important to us, or it could be just the landlord. So in a way, it appears in the text that ends up happening over time from the Sumerians all the way into the Assyrians, and when you have a shift in how these Anunnaki were referenced. So if you push far back, though, into a more archaic viewpoint, you start to hear about these Apkallu more and more, and they're associated specifically with the Pleiadian star system. There's the 7 sages, and they were described as being the teachers of the Anunnaki, and the Anunnaki were the great lords. And when you look at the King's List, you'll find the very old, you'll see the names, and then it will say, and the sage assigned was whichever, and then this one had this sage assigned. So sort of like a spirit. I don't want to use the word spirit because it sounds woo, ghosts and stuff, but there was like this otherworldly influence that was having an impact, guiding, like a spirit guide, I suppose, onto the Anunnaki rulers at the time. Over time, though, you start to see that wane, and you don't see the sage anymore, and you just see human kings, and it starts to dilute into something more mundane. But in the older versions, you start to see this picture of this other being that comes in, sometimes associated with the fishmen, the ones that come out of the waters and wear the fish cap and all of that. So these entities were described very differently than the Anunnaki. They were described as, again, being semi-biological, but also being able to appear, disappear, to manifest, and to be physical and non-physical. It's one of the only areas in the Sumerian text where you'll see actual supernatural claims. A lot of it is not so supernatural. Like if you see the behavior of the Anunnaki gods, aside from some feats, releasing the bull of heaven and all of this, which a lot of that could be translated one way, but interpreted to be another way. I mean, that could speak to Taurus or some sort of different thing like that.
Because they had a basic vocabulary. They had a vocabulary that they used back then to describe whatever, right? We have a vocabulary today that we even struggle with when describing something. We only have so many words, right, to use. And then you have two paths. You can interpret or you can interpolate. And how do you want to approach? And then you could be way off with the original Sumerian intention about what they saw, what they experienced, what they were documenting, a completely different subject than we are interpreting or interpolating, right? It's going through a filter today. So it's a strange position that we find ourselves in. Even the Epic of Gilgamesh is like that for me. How do you really want to there's translate, right? That's different, and that's a very direct thing. But you also have to interpret. You have to understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have their vocabulary, we have ours, and we're trying to meet somewhere in the middle to figure out what is going on.
And when we interpret, we're clearly bringing our own framework, and like our conceptual framework is being sublimated onto that because we have our own references. So it's really something that we have to deal with when looking at these texts. Something like the Epic of Gilgamesh, though, it's another one that it's, to me, kind of saying something very important about the civilizing of humans, that Enkidu was quite possibly more of a, I want to say Sasquatch entity, but like Enkidu was a wild person, somebody who was brought in and described to be civilized and turned into a human or humanized by simply getting a bath and shaving and whatever. So I think a lot of times what we're looking at in some of those old texts is this meeting of two worlds, the worlds colliding between this early way of being, having to interact with other types of hominids, and then figuring out civilization, how to coincide with that, how to deal with any of that, and during a time of great flux after the floods. So I think that that's probably where I stand with that in terms of the interpretations. The thing that just really hit me was that the Apkallu were looked at and framed in a very different way, and they were messengers. They had more of a supernatural kind of point of view to them. And then you start looking at what they were being implicated in, and most of those things were this idea of guiding the king, but also anointing. They were very ritual. They're the ones holding the pine cone, opening the third eye, this sort of thing. So when you look, I mentioned the cuffs earlier. If you were to look at the cuffs going around those, there are the Apkallu holding the pine, and we're talking like little, very little. They're so intricate. The cuffs are nice sized, but the art is just so intricate that they were able to put that sort of design all the way around it. So they were definitely looking at these Apkallu as something else. And so my takeaway from that and other research that I've done into them is that what we may be looking at is this is sort of the religion of the Anunnaki. So these are like, if we have the gods, the Anunnaki, that these may have been the gods of the gods. So that would paint a different picture again too. Like, well, then who were the Anunnaki? But when I'm looking at the flood myths, when I'm looking at the timeline, when I'm looking at the accounts of the people on the ground, the Sumerians themselves, and what they claim to have witnessed, and how they wrote about it too, it appears to me that the accounts of the Anunnaki were very human. And it starts to also look more like what we may be dealing with is a breakaway civilization, like an antediluvian breakaway civilization that was able to make it to various parts, including Sumer, and settle, kind of like a cargo cult. So looking at the individuals there and enslaving them and saying, we're the gods, so we have to have a priest class.
Before we head to the break, let me make this point, because I like where you're going with this. But whoever wrote those texts, whoever laid it out for us, didn't have a movie theater playing Steven Spielberg. Right? They didn't have, this science fiction, technology driven imagination where they were historically documenting their life, their reality. You know what I mean? It's not science fiction. It's not fiction.
They wouldn't lie. I don't believe that people write this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's I take them for their word.
You have to. So what was it that they were seeing, what they were experiencing? And it was important enough to absolutely look. They had the mundane laid out in the Sumerian text. They had taxes. They had grocery lists, right? They had goat trading, right? All of that is in the Sumerian text. But everything else was there too, with their history and documenting society and culture. And so, you have to take it at face value.
Yeah. I mean, there's no there's no reason to just assume that the ancients wrote just to trick us thousands of years later. I mean, they were writing what they were witnessing, and there were the primary sources. And so you have to take those very seriously. And if we can't understand what they were saying, that's a problem with our interpretation. And so we have to work harder to let those voices shine through so that we can understand what they were trying to say.
Fantastic conversation. Heather, you stay right there. Tonight, Dr. Heather Lynn is with us. It's all Anunnaki all night long. Dr. Heather Lynn. Heather, stay right there. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. I am hosting, speaking, and presenting once again for the Conscious Life Expo, the largest conference of its type in the world. February 20th through the 23rd, 2026 at the LAX Hilton. Speakers, event, and schedule easy. Just visit consciouslifeexpo.com. I will be hosting and speaking at the Sedona Ascension Retreat, March 20th through the 22nd, 2026 in Sedona, Arizona. An amazing list of speakers, and it's beautiful Sedona. Come and hang out with us and just go to SedonaAscensionRetreats.com. I'm heading back to the Midwest for the Contact Modalities Expo, May 1st through the 3rd, 2026, in Delavan, Wisconsin, at the Lake Resort. It is beautiful. This is a great conference right in the heart of the Midwest, where I'm from. I'll see you there. Just go to Contact Modalities Expo. It's XPO.com. I will be hosting and presenting once again at Contact in the Desert. That's May 28th through June 1st, 2026, the largest UFO conference in the world. Come and hang out with us June 23rd through July 1st. Tickets and everything else that you need is at contactinthedesert.com. Want to change your life? Want that paradigm shift? Then visit Peru with Brian Forrester and myself for the Inca Celebration of the Sun, June 23rd through July 1st, 2026. A full 10 days of visiting the country, all of the amazing sights, and of course, the celebration of the winter solstice. It's all simple to do. Go to hiddenincatours.com. Come join us for the Monty Python Scotland Tour, August 1st through the 9th, 2026. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event where you get to go to the castles from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. August 1st through the 9th, 2026. Just visit HaleyARamsey.com. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. Jimmy Church, Gaia TV, Fade to Black, here at Machu Picchu with Brian Forrester and Hidden Inca Tours. Amazing tour so far, Brian, but we're here to announce what we're going to do next year in 2026. What's going on?
Okay, November 2026, we're going to have our major tour of Peru and Bolivia, either a pre or post tour of Paracas and Nazca on the coast. And then after that, 6 days in Easter Island.
Bucket list, Easter Island. Come join Brian and I and his amazing team here at Hidden Inca Tours for Peru, Bolivia, and Easter Island. Signing out. Say goodbye, Brian.
Bye, gang.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest, Dr. Heather Lynn, is back with us. Her new book, The Anunnaki Revelation, is releasing February 2nd. You can pre-order now. We have the links below on our website and throughout social media. And let's get straight back to it. Heather, I actually, this is on point. It sounds like a deviation, but I want your take on this because the interdimensional aspect to the Anunnaki is very interesting. And there is another thing that comes into play here, Akhenaten. And I say that for a couple of different reasons. Akhenaten, he ruled Egypt for 17 years. But unlike any other pharaoh in the historical record, we have no reference to him until he becomes pharaoh. No record of his birth. He's Tutankhamun's the third. All of his children are there and documented except for him. And then he rules for 17 years, comes in, brings in monotheism, which was bizarre because they were polytheism at the time, and went back to that after he was done ruling. But the other crazy part, now, yes, he was strange looking. He had, unlike anything else we had ever seen depicted of a pharaoh, there's that part. He brings in the Aten, a new god, which was cosmic, right? It was a disc. Some say it's the sun. You could interpret it any way that you want, but that was the Aten. And then he just disappears. There's no record of his death. And that he just appears out of nowhere and then disappears. One of the most influential people in history, but we don't have any record of him before and after. And I've scratched my head on this. Most scholars won't talk this way, but I will. Seems interdimensional to me, and looks very different than anything else that we've seen depicted throughout history. And I find that very strange. So when we talk about the Anunnaki and an interdimensional component to them, then we have something like Akhenaten that came along that also appears to be interdimensional. Do you think that there is a connection to this? And is it, supporting your theory of the Anunnaki?
Very well could, if you consider the idea of avatars. This idea of maybe a world teacher, or this interdimensional aspect of maybe individuals who commune with these. And so this is an old idea. I mean, I guess in a spiritual context now, you may call it like possession. But that's sort of I hate to throw that out there even, because it just really conjures up a bunch of different ideas. But I remember a few different things that I read that Bob Lazar had to say about his understanding, or things he encountered that led him to say that aliens or other life viewed us as containers. So sort of like we're containers for souls, we're vessels. So if you just think about it in this maybe different sense, again, not to say spiritual, I feel like that's just too heavily loaded, but something like that, you might get a different view of how we're looking at this. So for instance, the Anunnaki themselves, it could be that they were very well just human beings, but maybe a particular type of human being, maybe particular human beings that had mastered some sort of special talents or skills, something that
evolved into something beyond this 3D aspect of our meat suits.
So that's what I contend, is that there was a connection to, well, pretty much we get the Noah story from this. The Noah story is far older than, of course, the Bible. And in this story, it talks about essentially a breakaway civilization. It doesn't it doesn't have the boat with the two animals and all of this. When you look at the actual translation, it discusses not that they were family members, but rather that these were individuals who were selected to go based on their knowledge of how they could contribute to a breakaway society. So the greatest scientist, the greatest astronomer, the greatest whatever. And so they took those individuals. Those individuals then took all of the animals of the steppe, which was a very important kind of thing to consider, because it wasn't every animal necessarily on Earth, but it was the animals that they would need in order to travel in a nomadic way and be able to then go and seed another area with animal husbandry and agriculture and this sort of thing. But they had foreknowledge of a cataclysm happening, great climate change. So in my view, what we're looking at is something akin to climate refugees who were leaving from a highly advanced civilization, and they were able to survive. And then they were able to influence the other humans that they encountered. Those other humans, being the semi-settled hunter-gatherers, having, yes, they had culture, they had pottery, they had beginnings of proto-language, but, and of course they most likely were speaking. We have physical evidence. You can tell when humans were actually speaking and able to make words. And so we may not have their language, but we know they were speaking to one another. But then you have this influx of new individuals that come, and what do? According to Sitchin's view, but according to what the texts actually say, is they were enslaving these people. And so they were making them do agriculture. They were making them serve. They were making them worship. And so here you have a situation where these individuals, these Anunnaki, aren't necessarily nice. they're subjugating. So whether they were coming down to, from space and mining gold or whatever, it doesn't matter. What you do see a line in both of the translations and the interpretations is this idea that these individuals came to enslave the local population and have them work for them. They had them dig to make water, like irrigation. They had them plant things. They had them do all of this. But then in order to communicate, they had to make a priest class. And then you start seeing the induction of the mystery religions, this idea of having to be initiated in. And you have when we get the story, of course, of Enki, and this very Promethean type story we hear all over the place all the time, is that one of these individuals starts to feel a little bad, like, oh, we're subjugating them and that's too bad. And, their women look pretty good. So maybe we should go and share some information. And what do they usually do, though? They share language and they say, hey, let me let in on the one secret that we have here. And so and that, of course, then has the rift between like Enki and Enlil or any of the other characters you see that's echoed through this myth, a fallen angel or what have you. It's this breaking away to give the Promethean flame the knowledge to the humans, and thereby releasing them potentially from this enslavement, starting battle and wars and discrepancies over who's in charge of the now formed civilization, until later this small group is dethroned because there was only so many of them. And so what we're looking at, in my view, is more of an anthropological tale, the meeting of different cultures after a great cataclysm happens. But there is still room.
How far is that away from us today? It sounds like all of the drama that we deal with today is like, I'm a drama, that they were doing this back then. And our way of being today was shaped, right, and really hasn't deviated much from the cultures thousands and thousands of years ago.
They set up that system for us, and we're still today. It's that system of civilization that it sounds great, and civilization is better than the alternative, I suppose, but it's this notion of a power structure, a hierarchy. It's the they invented things like professions and labor and all of this. So this idea of this pyramidal structure, a hierarchical social stratification system based on also currency and weights and measures and all of the things that are maybe taken for granted now. They did that in that 200-year blink of an eye, and we're still living in that as a result. I mean, the way we count seconds, minutes, and hours are based in the same system
That's
that they
right.
created. So we are still living in that because they set up the system for us. Then you have to think, well, it's an interesting, that's why I kind of am sympathetic towards this idea of Atlantis not being necessarily like you say Atlantis and a lot of people think it's just like Aquaman or something. But if you just go back to the Plato's account of what Solon said, it really does look to be like there was a great civilization that had things pretty well mastered. And I think that it was just agriculture. I think what we're looking at that they had was definitely a sense of, let's say, spiritual science, that they were able to tap into really amazing feats that we maybe have latent within ourselves, but we have not been able to necessarily evolve to the level that they had. And so you start to see over time this idea of shamanism. I mean, that's a new word for it. It's from the 1960s. They kind of retroactively put that word out there, but it kind of encapsulates this idea of older spirituality that was based in the shaman going into an altered state and having visions and vision quests and communing with other entities and being able to bring technology back, bring wisdom back. So this is something that I think has been for a long time. And it hits on that idea then of the ultra-terrestrial component and the Anunnaki. So if you imagine a situation where, say, there's a pre-flood civilization, we'll call it Atlantis, and there's a great population there, and they're very in tune with more than just agriculture, but they have a civilization, but they have these great spiritual technologies and developments within themselves that they're able to maybe be telepathic, who knows, they have something else. They are able to reach states of consciousness that only are now discovering may exist. And then a cataclysm happens and they have to move, and they go and disperse and encounter others, but they bring with them all of that within them. And then they pass that down. So I think aside from agriculture, and agriculture is huge, it's the agricultural revolution, it's the whole thing, right? I think the biggest revolution was the spiritual revolution, that they brought spiritual techniques of anthropologists call orgiastic behavior. So when you're listening to drum circles, or you're participating in these group activities, and you're getting really sort of into it, and you're getting into altered states, you're having visions, also being able to understand plant medicines and how to utilize those things to take you off into a different stratosphere, like just exactly.
but okay. So there's a follow-up question to this. Is there an interdimensional ultra-terrestrial civilization of Anunnaki right now, and then they cross that boundary and visit us, like right now, today, in the now?
So I think yes and no. I think some of the things like Enki, or I think this has to be answered carefully, because there's some Anunnaki that are more human than not. There's Anunnaki, there's Pantheon, and so we'll discuss the Pantheon, the Enki, the Enlil, and those. I think what those are type. And I don't mean that just in a character sense, but in the actual, what Carl Jung believed the archetypes were. They lived in a collective unconscious. That being said, means that they transcend the body. So they are, in fact, an ultra-terrestrial type entity. So they can be embodied in an individual. And I think that is something that they were trying to do with this ritualistic behavior. You'll often hear the gods left, but then the people who were spiritual, or the shamans, or in this case the kings, wanted to bring those gods back and have those gods speak through them, so they became the god. And so once they had this whole gill right and they were anointed, they were then able to take on a new persona. They were no longer themselves, they were the god incarnate. Now it was more than just a power play, because it is my belief that they were in touch with that entity, whatever that entity is. And so that being said, they could be very reasonable to think that those entities are still here, but just not here. Like you intimated that they're here, but they're just not here. It's this other dimensional component. And that one way that we may be able to witness them is through these altered states of consciousness that we're prescribing. So I think to answer it more directly, whether or not the Anunnaki are here, I think that when we talk about things like the machine elves, when we talk about perhaps angels, demons, not all of them, of course, but when we talk about the entities, elves, whatever it could be, archons, I think that we're all sort of pulling on the same thread, like the parable of the blind man and the elephant. Everybody, one has the trunk, another has the foot, and they're arguing about, what do you have? I have this. And they're all describing it, but they can't see that they're really holding on to this bigger picture. They just have a piece of the truth. So sometimes the language is problematic because we say elves, fairies, self-replicating machines, whatever new term we want to put to it. But Carl Jung said they were the archetypes. And I feel like that is a better way to look at them. And again, some people may not be satisfied with that because it doesn't have a realness to it. It almost seems like, oh, they're just fantasy then. But fantasy, imagination is magic. The imagination is where you go inward and you visualize. And in some ways you can, if you're on the right drugs, or if you're doing the right meditation, or in some ways, if people are practicing the occult, ways that they could do this, this imagination becomes something more. It manifests. It can become an egregore even. So I think we're dealing with something.
Plato's cave.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Fascinating. Well, okay. But did they create us? That's one of the components of the story that everybody, wants that answer to.
Mm-hmm.
So are we a creation of the Anunnaki?
Possibly, but I don't know if it would be best represented with something like the ancient gods and lab coats and beakers. But I think that there's definitely reason to believe that something happened. And I think that not to mention AI again, is like as though it's going to save us all, because it's probably going to do the opposite. But artificial intelligence is getting much better now at being able to look at the human genome and try to identify where there may have been SNPs or things changed, to be able to locate exactly what changed and when, to determine if it were just simple environmental factors that may have launched us into one way or another, or to be able to see if there was some sort of actual splicing that occurred, in which case we'll have maybe a better answer to that. But I think that when you look at the trajectory of human nature and what we've been able to accomplish, and I throw it back to that big brain bang again, we don't really know how we got to this point where our brains started just getting really large and we started getting very intelligent and able to abstract in the level that we have. There's a handful of explanations. One has been Richard Wrangham and his catching fire theory. And that's a really good one, where you basically were able to cook the food to the point where it broke the cell wall of the vegetation, so that you were able to access the nutrients when there wasn't meat available. And so cooking food makes it more nutrient dense. And that's a good one. But then there's also Terence McKenna, who brought up stoned ape theory. That could have been that while we were chasing ungulates and on their dung, the mushrooms grow, they're psychedelic, and we were just trying to get to our food source, but in the meantime eating these and then starting to have these. Yeah, exactly. So the problem I have with that, though, is that it wouldn't necessarily get passed down generationally if you have a psychedelic experience. It would get passed down culturally, though, so then you would have a new ritual that would be very important.
You could teach it.
You could teach it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, and then there's an idea of fish. The people on the coast, once people were moving closer out that way, having access to fish with HA and a different omega fatty acids being very good for the brain, and that would affect the fetus. So if pregnant females eating that sort of like superfood, then the baby's going to have a bigger brain, and so on. And so there's all of these questions about like, well, what
There's
was
the sugar cane theory, which I prescribe to.
it?
As
I'm
soon
not
as
familiar with that one.
okay, well, two things were key, which is okay. Eating sugar cane gave our brain the energy that it needed to grow. It's very energy intensive, right? It
Mhm.
takes a lot of energy. That combined with red meat. And
Mm.
that you had the protein side and you had the fuel side happen at the same time. And that was the expansion of which is part of the decline of the Western civilization, right? Now we're not
Yeah.
eating sugar or red meat and we're getting stupid. So maybe
Well,
there is something to that. I
well,
don't
that's
know.
yeah. So, but those are the things that I guess my broader point is that we don't know why we are the way we are. But so we can infer something happened, that there was a catalyst, that it wasn't just an organic sort of evolution, because we know what happened, and then all of a sudden, boom, something took off. So just like something took off with the idea of civilization, something took off on a biological level for us that was also rapid. So there was a catalyst in both situations. So whether or not that it was something environmental, or we can have those discussions, but I wouldn't rule out that some form of intervention. And I don't think that it would require some massive scientific lab. In fact, I think it's a very very old-fashioned way. If you consider that individuals may be very good at animal husbandry, and they built a civilization in which we were meant to serve them and worship them and work for them, then we would have been their cattle too, and they would have bred us the same way. So there could have been selective breeding, there could have been selective nutrition, there could have been a lot of different things, as well as then the cultural milieu of psychedelics and ritual behavior, and getting us involved in a whole host of different, say, mystery traditions or initiation events where we were brought up somehow spiritually, physically. I would bet that it would have something more to do with that than something that was a little like, there's your gene sequence. But again, the genes would bear that out as well. So you would be able to see that. I think we're going to find those answers within the next probably 20 years at the least. But I do think that there was probably some intervention.
There, when you look at the basics of things, and the domestication of wheat certainly was huge, right? You almost can't measure how big it was, but how did it happen? Because if you and I, right, 15,000 years ago, and we're out on the savannah running away from jaguars, right, trying not to get eaten. Well, that's how you survived. You know who got eaten? The guy that stopped on the savannah going, wait, oh man, it's coming to me. Wheat. We need to, right? So those thinkers, that kind of stuff got them into trouble because you were always in survival mode. You had to survive the night when the beast came out, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just had to get to the sun up in the morning. And that was the challenge of day-to-day life. So how, or was it like Occam's razor? Did somebody come along and teach them about the domestication of wheat? Did somebody teach them a written language? Did somebody teach them the cosmos? Did somebody teach them mathematics and these ideas? Because it all seemed to happen at rapid
Oh, yeah.
fire.
I think it was taught. I mean, I really have no doubt that these were things that were taught, and it's a kind of an unpopular take, especially in like a mainstream context, because it infers that there was some sort of lacking on the part of the Paleolithic people. But I mean, it is what it is. It's
Well,
just
you can't Heather, you can't go against the dogma. That's heresy.
Right.
That's heresy.
I am such a heretic in every way. It's terrible. But yeah, but I think that's what it is that you have a clear point. You can say, well, we had thousands of years of evolving and we never really did it until right there. So there's a lot of,
isn't that a pile of bullshit? And let me tell you why it is. That I'm going to say dogma again in the same paragraph, but forever 3000 BC was the magic year, right? Don't talk to us about anything before 3000 BC. There's nothing to discuss, right? It's Sumer and the Fertile Crescent and Egypt, Rome and Greece. That was 1500 years later. That wasn't even in the play, right? So it's all right there. Egypt and Sumer, Mesopotamia. But Gobekli Tepe comes
I was
along.
going to say that.
Yeah.
It's like a drinking game. I'm waiting for Gobekli Tepe.
And Gobekli Tepe.
There you go.
Here's the thing with that, though. That's 7,000 years prior.
Right.
Not 700, not 7 weeks, not 7,000 years before. And what does that do? That goes right into that 12,500 BC magic number that ties into Pumapunku and Central and South America and other cultures around the world where that number, Epic of Gilgamesh, right? The King's List at Edfu. And the builders, so you read that script, you read the builder's text, and it clearly states that somebody showed up in Egypt 10,000 years before they wrote it, which was at 2000 BC, right? So 12,000 years ago, the people, the founders of Egypt showed up and started teaching us things. And it's really weird where we get this repetition of stuff 3,000 years before what academia wanted us to believe for years, that dogma segment of things. And I think that's crucial. What's scarier to the world? ET is visiting us, ghosts are real, or there was an ancient civilization right before everything. Listen, what would terrify the world more? Probably the ancient civilization thing.
I think the implication of where they went is probably the thing everybody in positions of power are afraid of. And I think that's at the core of this is the myth of progress, this myth that we are on this linear path towards something physically. Like maybe in a spiritual sense, sure, we can ascend, but how about at a material sense? If we say, well, no, we aren't better than we were maybe before, that what if this was a reboot and we're not quite there and that the past was much better? That's
terrifying.
It's terrifying because it could happen again. And I think that's what they know. I think they know that if you have this myth of the linear progress, there's the cyclical component, like the Kali Yuga, like this idea that, hey, something could happen again. Are we in for another, say, reboot event? And I think that's probably the scarier thing. And I think that's the thing that some people are actually preparing for.
When we look at where we are today, seems pretty cool. Seems like this could go on forever. Well, let's talk about Egypt, right? Where you have the first nation, right? Was Egypt, the first nation. 3,000 years. Right, 3,000. United States, 250 years old. It's nothing, right? Egypt, 3,000. How did that just go away and get covered up in sand? How could that happen? It happened to Rome. It happened to Greece, right? And we see this repetition over and over again. Is it possible that a civilization prior came and went, and then something else evolved, and maybe even something else, and then us? And that's terrifying to think about because we just think that we've got it all figured out. Well, you know what? Egypt did too at one point.
Yeah.
Egypt had it all figured out. They really did.
And it makes us feel safe and in control to think that we're at the top, we're at the apex, and it's only going to get bigger and better. And one day it's like the Jetsons, flying cars, and who knows, we'll live forever. And it's just this promise that I don't think that is in the cards necessarily, because we have to realize that we are not God, big G. There is such a thing still as nature, and the best laid plans of mice and men, right? I mean, we're going to build something, and then all of a sudden one day it's like a solar flare, a comet, some great cataclysm, pole shift, whatever it could be. But we're going to be sitting there on like TikTok or something, giggling at some video, and then boom, the whole thing's over and an EMP hits. And then we're trying to figure out how to make fire again. I mean, I know that sounds dire, but I really think that that is within the realm of possibility. And, I'm trying to say everybody go get your storable foods, although you should, but, go get your storable foods or whatever. But it's this humility. We have to have more of a humility and more appreciation for where we're at, and an appreciation for the people of the past. And don't look at them as though they were, starting at square one. And now we're so evolved that maybe they knew something. So Graham Hancock always says that, we're a species within Asia. And I would agree with that. But I also would add that we're a species with post-traumatic stress disorder, that somehow all of us at a civilizational level know that something happened, and we work through it, just like somebody with some sort of PTSD, where they go through something and then maybe the trauma leads them to reenact the cycle over and over again, and they're just trying to grapple with it. They say that people who I don't know, somebody grows up with like an alcoholic father, and then they end up with alcoholic men, and they just are trying to fix that. And so there's this whole thing that is a profile psychologically that an individual can have, but that a society can have as well. And I think that's something that when you look at, say, the monolith or the hero's journey, when you look at our stories and our myths and the things that we're trying to always say, we're always trying to warn, we're always trying to tell some message in these stories cross-culturally that, hey, watch out, be humble. This could happen again. They're always warning us that a cataclysm is just around the corner. Be humble. Just be God-fearing, whatever that God is.
Here's the thing with that, and it's so true. Let's say, hypothetically, let's just go with this. EMP hits tomorrow. Everything is over. We're back to the Stone Age in 2 weeks. That's how long it'll take for our food supply chain to run out, and we are tribal, club-wielding, right?
Right.
Craziness. Okay, if that happens, how long? I'm a smart guy. I know how this works, right? I know how to dial. I know how to serve. How long does it take for us to build factories to make these again?
Exactly. We're not.
How long?
10,000 forever.
Years?
Right.
Yeah. Maybe never. Maybe we'll evolve in another direction.
Maybe, right.
That's a humbling thought. There was a paper published in the time that we have left. We spoke about this throughout the whole show. There was, check this out. There was a paper published 2 weeks ago by a materials scientist, a pragmatic, non-spiritual, black and white, chemically driven, right? Chemistry, material scientist that went and looked at the math and came to the conclusion that consciousness is non-local and exists before material space and time. Consciousness is first. And that's like a holy crap moment, right? That's the opposite of what any physicist or chemist or biologist is going to tell you. That consciousness is particles that accumulate between your ears, and consciousness arises out of that. It's local. She says no. And the paper is now published. That's a really, really big deal. And that aligns with what the ancients have been talking to us about for thousands and thousands of years. You and I, well, I can't speak for you, but our community has always been consciousness is what connects the universe, right? It's first and it comes to us. If science starts to, and they should, starts to look at this fundamentally and rethink who we are, then we will evolve as a species.
Yeah.
That's a pretty extraordinary moment, isn't it? But the amnesia, right? The ancients already knew that, but somewhere we got the disconnection, right? Capitalism came along, right? Whatever. But what do you make of that? Do you think science is ready for this kind of new framework?
Well, yes and no. The industry of science, no. The people, the rational minded people, we've been far past this. We all sort of know. We're really awake to this. Consciousness is all there is, really, at the end of the day. Now, of course, what is consciousness? Who knows? Nobody's able to give us a really great definition of that. But there is something. There is something, and I think that this is the golden thread that ties everything together from the now to the past. The thing that I think it transcends this idea of the Anunnaki, because I think it is the playground of the Anunnaki, so to speak. I think that that's what we're looking at, is something that is consciousness oriented and something that was in the past, but is also something we're dealing with now in terms of a phenomena. So for instance, and I'm not the only person who thinks this necessarily. And in fact, a lot of people who are in the hard sciences are looking at it in this way. So there's a lot of research going into, say, like extended states of whether it's DMT or other chemicals, but going into extended states of altered consciousness in order to get information, often commune with these entities, whatever they may be, whether they're Apkallu, whether they're Anunnaki, whether they're who knows, whatever they are. Even in this modern era where we have hard science and facts and technology, we have a lot of technologists who are researching this, going through these states in order to get in touch with something that we would say is within the realm of collective unconscious. So even at that material sense, we're dealing with something that is undeniably immaterial.
Do you believe, I said believe, do you know, do you know of, do you think that ET is visiting us in the past? Yes, I would say yes. That's a hard yes. But like right now, today, are we being visited? Are we in contact?
I think so. I think so. I don't know that it's anything like what we were told or led to believe through media and movies, and some of it maybe, because some people do like to put a little disclosure in here and there in the arts. But overall, I think that what we're dealing with is something that is non-local. It's extraterrestrial in origin, but I'm one of those people that I think that if you're so advanced that you can just come and visit us and whatever, then you're probably not doing it in those 1960s and bolts machines, but instead you're doing something completely different, completely unknown to us, at least, and able to do something at a level that our science just doesn't understand, and that we may look at that and call it spiritual or something, because we lack the terminology otherwise. But no, I definitely think that we're being visited. I think we've always been visited. And I just don't think we have the right words and framework as a people to understand what that looks like. Now, some of us do. Some of us have access to that information, and hopefully those individuals will, clue us in a little bit better. But maybe it's something that we're not ready for. Maybe we aren't ready for disclosure. I would like to be. I want to know. So I'd rather pull the Band-Aid off, right? I'm tired of the waiting game. I'm ready to know, but maybe it's something so big.
It could be right, Heather. It could be a mix of just about everything that we can imagine. It could be physical metallic craft. where they have figured out a way to get from point A to point B in a craft. It could be interdimensional. It could be that. It could be uh, traveling between universes and the multiverse. It could be that where the travel time is instant. It's not. It doesn't take minutes or hours or years. It's in, and different civilizations out there have figured out the logistics of getting from one point in the universe to the other, and we're just not there yet. So it could be a mix of everything, because I've seen physical craft. I've seen those. How did it get here? I don't know. What's behind? I don't know. But I've seen stuff appear and disappear too, as well. And as crazy as that sounds, it doesn't mean that I'm suggesting it's the same race or species of ET from the same planet. No, man, there's so many stars and planets and galaxies out there that maybe they visit us just once.
We don't even know what's in our oceans. So
no, we don't.
How do we not know? I mean, there could be things in the ocean. There's also, of course, hollow earth theory. There's a lot of things to consider that we just don't know. And so I think that if we grapple with that, it might be a little scary to think that there's things that have like been on Earth with us that are maybe on some level that we don't see them, but they're here with us, that they're also maybe beneath our feet or in our waters and in our sky, and they're coming in and out all the time. I think that if we opened ourselves up to that, people might be very scared. And so maybe that's why it's easier to just deny that any of it exists at all.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I mean, I would love for some crazy announcement, right? So we can just go, okay, now let's go and figure that out, right?
Yeah.
So we got that answered. Okay. But could the planet really handle, the White House, right, the Oval Office live on TV going, well, okay, yes, we're not alone. As a matter of fact, we've got a base in the Pacific. We've got a base in the Atlantic Ocean, and we've known about it for a long time, and we're in contact, and they come and go as they please. What? Right? That could be anarchy.
I think it would be. And so you really have to, I mean, I used to be a little more like activist about these sorts of things. Again, back to like when I first started, I was more like, democracy, everyone has to know everything at all times. And I've since sort of tempered that a little bit, because I've seen some things myself and had to think about how to say certain things or maybe not say certain things, and which is disappointing. But sometimes you can do more harm than good by telling people everything they're not ready to hear.
Yeah, I've done the same thing. I have done the same thing. I have I've toned it down a bit. The things that I've experienced, I've verbalized and spoken about probably 1% of them.
Yeah.
The rest of it, it's, let's just let this play out, and I'll talk about it later. But let's let some things bubble to the surface before we start to go there. There's that part. Then there's another. I was just like you, man. Let it all out.
Let it all
No
out.
secrets allowed, right? But
Yeah.
really, honestly, some things need to remain a secret.
I agree.
Yeah, here we humans can't handle stuff, and there are, believe it or not, there's bad people in this world.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Really, there is. I know. Newsflash, right? Newsflash. And if that's letting us know about the nature component of it, nature, which is there life out there? That's nature, right? Is there a new species in the Amazon forest? Well, we're allowed to know that. Well, is there something out there? Well, that's ours. That's humans' right to know. Is there something that needs to be kept secret about that we don't want bad people to know about, a technology or whatever? Well, I'm okay with that. I'm okay if there's something like that you need to keep on the down low. But is there life out there? Is it visiting us? That shouldn't be kept from us. That I think I think the planet knows this. They just need it confirmed.
Yeah. Yeah. And we need to be able to figure out what we're going to do next so that we don't have a big surprise. We don't want that White House lawn sort of moment. We want to be able to break ourselves and figure out how to integrate these ideas and move forward. And I don't think it's always negative, but I think people can handle more than what they're giving us.
Now, we're talking about the Anunnaki tonight. Let's close out with this. I want your take. Talked about the pine cones. We talked about poppies and Hayron. Boop. Is the handbags. What is going on with the handbags? What's your take?
Well, the idea that it's involved with agriculture is sort of a starting point. But I happen to think after researching this sort of Hillgill Rite and what the Sumerians were doing with this, it was associated more with this poppy, this cultivation, not just like pollination, but more like the pollination of the mind. So this anointing. So it was more of like a ritual thing. And there are different handbags so that were discovered that were actually made of stone. So we don't really know what they were made of, but there are some replicas that have been discovered in these regions that are like carved out of stone, and so they're containers. Some people have suggested that they're used to weight a coffin, so like you would almost like an anchor. So they've tried to figure out what these things they were, but they very much look like just the handbags. So if you consider in this idea of maybe there's a substance that they're using or they're doing something for ritual purposes, and they are in fact made of stone, then that could make sense into having a vessel to hold whatever it is the medicinal things were. So to not know what they were made of makes it a little more difficult. If they were made of something more organic, like a cloth or some sort of animal inside, like a stomach or something, then it would have been more difficult to, I think, have the substance that they would have been using for the anointing purposes. Having it in stone would have been easier, and there are stone ones that have been found. So, but whether or not that's what it is, it's really just impossible to say. My gut tells me that it has to do with something more ritual and something that it's still tied to this opening of the third eye or this transcendence or this initiation process into something greater. You do see it in all of the sites that have these great civilizations and these turning points where something big happens. It's never just, willy-nilly here or there. It's somewhere profound, and it's an important part of the architecture or the art motif. So I just am more inclined to believe that these are ritual items that are implicated in the transcendent sort of quest that they had.
Interesting. I think it's knowledge. I think it's like the nuclear suitcase, the nuclear football, that the
That's
president
cool.
carries around with him.
Yeah.
That it could be that, like, just knowledge, collective knowledge. What I do find very interesting, that just about every culture has done this, and you can point around the world. The most important things that stand out with these civilizations, they don't talk about. There's no information from the Egyptians how they built the pyramids. There's no architectural, how they built the temples. There's nothing in Egypt on how mummification happened. These fundamental things, right? The foundation, the fabric of, there's nothing there, right? It's like really bizarre. China's got the same situations with it, even India, right? These very fundamental are not described. And it's the same thing with these handbags that every culture in the world seems to have, but there's no descriptor tied to it.
So
And
do you think
I find that bizarre.
Do you think they're then like so in many indigenous communities, they had the sacred bundles? Do you think it's something like that, where these
Yes,
are?
where it's the knowledge that continues the civilization that has been accumulated
Mm,
and handed down. I think that's what it is. And there's okay, and I'll give you another example of, and I keep going back to Egypt, but I research Egypt every single day. Trip on this. King Tut's tomb, complete, right? Everything was in there. It was cool. Everything that a pharaoh needed and had was placed in that tomb. Solid gold coffin, right? Crazy, insane. Everything was in there. You know what was not in there?
building
His,
plans for the pyramids.
his crown.
Oh, well, I guess, yeah.
Every pharaoh depicted in hieroglyphs, in temples, everywhere, the crowns are there, both, right?
Hmm.
Upper and Lower Egypt. The two crowns are there. They're depicted. No crowns have ever been discovered in Egypt. Now, so, well, okay, maybe they were lost, or they were this or that. Okay, well, King Tut's tomb was complete. Got everything out of there except for the crowns. And it kind of goes back to like this hand. So what did the crown, what did it represent, and why has it? It's everywhere. It's all over every temple, right? You see it. Never been found. And it goes back to those, we don't know. It's like one of these mysteries, like those handbags. And the
They're a
pine
mystery.
cones too. The pine cones too. There's no rhyme or there's nothing in the historical record that says what that means and what it represents. I find that part fascinating. And do we back up, Heather, and go, well, some things we're just not supposed to know. Maybe
No.
that's it. You don't
No,
think
we
so?
got to keep digging. Nope.
Well,
Gotta
that's
keep
what I'm
going.
that's what drives me, trying to get to these answers. And I think that in the end, consciousness is going to be the key for
Yeah,
us to not only evolve, but to understand it fully. And maybe we're not supposed to understand it. Maybe we're not. Maybe it's just supposed to be, just one step away from us. But ET has probably got it figured out. And
probably.
yeah, that's my question, by the way. I say it on every show. That's my question to ET. Not food, not a cure for cancer or pollution no. Consciousness, man. How did you guys figure that out?
Yeah. Oh, I'd like to know that too. But we won't stop. We won't stop asking these questions, and we're going to try to find it out no matter what, even though maybe there are some things that we shouldn't find out. But I'm a glutton for punishment. So
You're the best. You're the absolute best. Where can everybody follow all of your work? What's the best thing to do?
www.drheatherlynn.com. It's drheatherlynn.com, and you'll find everything there.
Book comes out February 2nd. You excited?
Very excited. I'm so excited for this one. It's like loaded with lots of original discoveries and like really wild ideas. And it's just, I'm dying to get it out.
Well, isn't it fun to step outside of the box? Isn't that the
Yeah.
best thing to do?
It is so much fun. It is so much fun because it feels freeing. It's just like getting dead weight off and being like, I see it now. So it's awesome.
You're the best. I really appreciate our friendship, and we've been doing this forever. And
Yeah.
we've had a gap. Let's not gap this again. Okay.
No gap. Call me. I'm always around.
I know. And we do have some plans when you come out to LA. I'm going to make that happen. Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
all
yeah,
right.
That's awesome.
All right.
Gotcha.
All
right.
I'll talk to you. Dr. Heather Lynn. Heather, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
The absolute very best. Dr. Heather Lynn, her links are below. The book is out, available for pre-order right now. It is out February 2nd. Anunnaki Revelations. Okay. All right, so that is it for tonight. I will tell you what I am doing tomorrow in 1 second, which is, tomorrow night, live from the UK, Gary Hazeltine is with us, and former police officer, RAF, by the way. Tomorrow night, we're going to talk about Rendlesham and his work in with his UFO database. We're going to be doing all of that tomorrow night with Gary from the UK. Thank you, Heather. Perfect show tonight. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow night. But for now, all I've got is Gobekli Tepe. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Gobekli Tepe.